The night I signed my divorce papers, my father downed me on his doorstep. I walked into the rain with nothing but a bag and the homeless boy I had taken in. 3 weeks later, as we shivered in a train station, the child whispered that his father was a billionaire. I assumed it was a fantasy until a stranger called my phone to say I was holding property that did not belong to me. My name is Piper Foster, and the moment the heavy oak doors of the Franklin County Courthouse swung shut behind me, I felt less like a woman who had just regained her freedom and more like a survivor stumbling away from a plane crash. The sky over Columbus was a bruised purple, swollen with the threat of a storm that had been brewing since morning. In my hand, I clutched a manila envelope containing the final decree of my divorce. It was done. The gavel had banged, echoing like a gunshot in a library. And just like that, 10 years of my life were reduced to a stack of papers and a terrifying silence. I stood on the sidewalk, the wind whipping strands of hair across my face, and checked my pockets. I had $40 in cash, a maxed-out credit card, and a debit card that I knew Derek, my now ex-husband, had likely already drained to the legal limit. I was 34 years old, and I was effectively starting over from zero. Actually, I was starting from less than zero. A small hand tugged at the hem of my coat. I looked down. Eli was standing there, his oversized gray hoodie pulled up to shield his face from the biting wind. He was 8 years old, though his eyes held the weary caution of an old man who had seen too many winters. He was not my biological son. He was not my adopted son. According to the court and the state of Ohio, he was a non-relative minor I had irresponsibly harbored a piece of ammunition Derek had used to paint me as mentally unstable during the proceedings. But to me, he was the only thing in this world that made sense. "Are we going home now, Miss Piper?" Eli asked, his voice barely audible over the rush of passing traffic. I swallowed the lump of panic rising in my throat. Home. The word tasted like ash. The judge had awarded the house to Derek. It was a tactical loss I had accepted to keep my record clean enough to potentially fight for guardianship of Eli later. But for tonight, home was a concept we could not afford. "Not yet, buddy," I said, forcing a brightness into my tone that I did not feel. "We have to make a stop first. My dad wants to see us." My phone buzzed in my pocket, a violent vibration against my hip. I pulled it out. The screen displayed the word father. It was not a warm title. It was a description of biological rank. I swiped right. "I'm out," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "It's over." There was no sympathy on the other end. No question of how I was coping. Just a voice as crisp and cold as the autumn air. "Come to the house immediately. Do not make me wait." The line went dead before I could answer. I used 20 of my remaining $40 on a ride share to the suburbs as the city grit gave way to the manicured lawns and wide tree-lined streets of Beeksley. A familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. This was the world I had been raised in. A world of appearance, of silence, of problems swept neatly under expensive rugs. My father's house stood on a corner lot, a pristine colonial revival with white pillars that looked like they had been scrubbed with a toothbrush that very morning. The windows were dark, save for the porch light that cast a clinical judging glow onto the driveway. I asked the driver to drop us off at the curb. I did not want him to see what was about to happen. "Stay close to me," I whispered to Eli as we walked up the driveway. The concrete was smooth, uncracked, perfect. Everything here was perfect. I rang the doorbell. I did not have a key. I had not had a key to this house since I was 22. A subtle reminder that I was a guest in my father's life, not a permanent fixture. The door opened instantly. My father stood there. He was wearing a pressed dress shirt and slacks. Despite the late hour, his silver hair was combed back without a single strand out of place. He looked at me. Then his gaze dropped to Eli. His upper lip curled slightly, a micro-expression of disgust that vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a mask of stone. "Dad," I started, the word feeling small in my mouth. "I don't have anywhere else tonight." Derek locked the accounts. The motel wanted a deposit I couldn't cover. "I just need you chose this," he interrupted. His voice was not loud. My father never yelled. He believed yelling was for people who lacked control. "He destroyed you with volume level 3. I told you what would happen if you fought Derek. I told you that you were humiliating this family. He was abusive. Dad, financial abuse is still abuse." I pleaded, my hand tightening around Eli's small fingers. I couldn't stay. And him. My father pointed a finger at Eli, not as if he were a child, but as if he were a stray dog I had dragged in from the gutter. "You brought the boy. The reason your marriage collapsed. The reason my name was dragged through the mud in those court documents." Eli shrank behind my leg. I stepped forward, shielding him with my body. "He is a child. Dad, he has nobody. I just need one night. Just the guest room. We'll be gone by morning. Please, it's going to rain." My father didn't move. He blocked the doorway like a sentinel. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a long white envelope. He held it out to me. "I am a man of my word, Piper. I told you that if you walked out of that marriage and chose this crusade over your stability, you were on your own." I looked at the envelope. "What is this?" "A severance," he said. The word hung in the air, grotesque and corporate. Inside is a document prepared by my attorney. It states that you hold no further claim to the family trust. No claim to this property and no claim to my assistance. It also states that you will not contact me or your mother's relatives to beg for money. My stomach dropped. I felt like I had been punched. "Do you want me to sign a contract to stop being your daughter?" "You stopped being my daughter the moment you decided your savior complex was more important than our reputation." He said, "Sign it, and there is $5,000 in cash in there, enough to get you out of my city. Don't sign it and you get nothing." I looked at his eyes. They were blue like mine, but they were empty of anything resembling love. They were the eyes of a man who looked at a balance sheet and cut the losses. He was looking at Eli as the loss. He was looking at me as a bad investment. The wind picked up, swirling dead leaves around our feet. The first drops of rain began to fall, cold and sharp against my cheek. "I won't sign it," I whispered. "Then you have made your choice," he said. "Dad, please. It's raining. He's a child. He is a mistake. And now he is solely your mistake." My father took a step back and began to close the door. I lunged forward, jamming my foot in the jamb. Desperation overriding my pride. "Dad, just the garage. Let us sleep in the garage." He looked down at my foot, then back up at my face. "Remove your foot, Piper, or I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing." "Do not think I won't." I froze. I knew he would. He was a man who respected the law far more than he respected blood. I pulled my foot back. The door clicked shut. Then came the sound of the deadbolt sliding home. It was a heavy final sound. It sounded like the lid of a coffin being nailed down. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the wood grain, waiting for him to change his mind, waiting for the door to open, waiting for the father who used to push me on the swings to realize he had just left his only child out in the cold. But the porch light flickered once and then went out. We were in the dark. "Miss Piper." Eli's voice was trembling. "Is he mad at me?" I turned around, crouching down so I was eye level with him. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking into the thin fabric of his hoodie. I wiped a raindrop from his cheek. Or maybe it was a tear. Couldn't tell. "No, Eli," I lied. My voice cracked, but I forced it steady. "He's not mad at you. He's just confused. Old people get confused sometimes. I stood up and grabbed my bag. Come on, we have to walk. Where? To the train station. It's warm there and dry. We walked. We walked for 3 miles in the rain. I could have called another car with my last $20, but I was terrified. I was terrified that $20 was the only barrier between us and starvation tomorrow. So we walked. The suburbs gave way to strip malls, and strip malls gave way to the industrial gray of the city center. My shoes were soaked through, squelching with every step. Eli trudged beside me, never complaining. His hand gripping mine so tight his knuckles were white. He was used to this. He was used to the cold and the wet. That realization broke my heart more than my father's rejection. When we finally reached the Union Station, it was nearly midnight. The building was a cavernous echo chamber of limestone and glass. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was not a place for sleeping, but it was a place for waiting. And right now, we were waiting for a miracle that I knew wasn't coming. We found a bench in the far corner, away from the main entrance where the wind blew in every time the automatic doors hissed open. I took off my coat and draped it over Eli. Just for one night, I whispered, tucking the collar around his chin. Promise, Eli, just for one night. Tomorrow I'll figure it out. I'll get a job at a diner. I'll sell my watch. We'll get a room. Eli didn't answer. He curled his knees up to his chest, making himself as small as possible. It was a defensive posture, one he had mastered long before I found him. He closed his eyes, but his hand reached out and found mine again. He squeezed it. He held on as if letting go meant he would dissolve into the ether, as if I was the only anchor keeping him in this dimension. The station was mostly empty, save for a few other souls drifting like ghosts near the restrooms. But then I felt it, the weight of eyes. I looked up across the concourse. A security guard was leaning against a pillar. He wasn't patrolling. He was watching us. He was a heavy-set man with a uniform that strained at the buttons, his hand resting idly near his belt. He wasn't looking at us with pity. He was looking at us with suspicion. I shifted my body, blocking his view of Eli. A primal animalistic panic flared in my chest. In my old life, a security guard meant safety. In this life tonight, he meant a threat. He meant questions I couldn't answer. He meant Child Protective Services taking Eli away because I didn't have a roof. He meant I was the bad guy. I nudged Eli gently. Scoot in, I whispered. Into the shadow. Don't let him see your face. We shifted deeper into the gloom of the corner. The lights of the station hummed overhead. A low electric buzz that sounded like a headache waiting to happen. I stared back at the guard until he finally lost interest and turned away to harass a teenager near the ticket kiosks. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I was 34 years old. I had a college degree. I had been a wife, a homeowner, a taxpayer, and in the span of 6 hours, I had become a vagrant, hiding in the dark, terrified of a rent-a-cop. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind a crushing exhaustion. I leaned my head back against the cold stone wall. I closed my eyes for a second just to rest them. Miss Piper. The whisper was so soft I almost thought I imagined it. I opened my eyes. Eli was looking up at me. His eyes were wide, dark pools reflecting the harsh overhead lights. He looked terrified. Not of the cold, not of the guard, but of something else. Something internal. What is it, sweetie? Go to sleep. He chewed on his lip, hesitating. Then he leaned up, pulling on my hand to bring my ear closer to his mouth. His breath was warm against my freezing skin. If I tell the truth, he faltered, his voice barely a breath. If I tell the truth, will you hate me? I pulled back to look at him, confused. Hate you, Eli? Nothing you could say would make me hate you. Why would you ask that? He looked over my shoulder at the dark glass of the station doors, at the rain lashing against the world outside, and then back at me. The fear in his eyes was absolute. Because he started, then stopped. Because what? He swallowed hard. Because I'm not who you think I am. I frowned, brushing a damp lock of hair from his forehead. You're Eli. You're my brave boy. He shook his head slowly. No, he whispered, the sound sliding into the space between us like a knife. I think my dad is a billionaire. I stared at him for a moment. The absurdity of the statement hung in the air, competing with the announcement of a delayed train over the intercom. I wanted to laugh. It was a child's coping mechanism, a fairy tale spun to keep the cold at bay. My dad is a billionaire. My dad is a king. My dad is coming to save us. I opened my mouth to soothe him, to tell him it was okay to pretend. But then my phone, which I thought I had silenced, lit up in my lap. It wasn't a call. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize. No area code, just a string of digits that looked wrong. I picked it up, my hands trembling. The message was 3 words, not yours. Return. I looked at the phone. I looked at Eli, and for the first time since I had walked out of the courthouse, the cold I felt wasn't from the rain. It was coming from inside the room to understand why I was standing in a freezing train station with a boy who claimed to be a billionaire's son. You have to go back 5 months. You have to go back to the version of Piper Foster who still believed that if she just followed the rules, the world would stop trying to break her. Back then, I was an administrative coordinator at Luminesque Solutions, a mid-tier logistics firm where the carpet was the color of despair and the fluorescent lights hummed at a frequency designed to induce migraines. My life was a series of spreadsheets and silent panic attacks. I was married to Derek Vance, a man who treated our marriage less like a partnership and more like a hostile takeover. Derek was a portfolio manager, charming to strangers, and a forensic accountant. When it came to my spending, he didn't hit me. He didn't have to. He just controlled the flow of oxygen. Every grocery receipt was audited. Every minute of my commute was tracked. I was slowly suffocating, and I was planning my escape in $5 increments, hidden in a tampon box under the bathroom sink. It was a Tuesday in late October when the universe decided to pry my life open. I had taken a half-day off work, lying to Derek that I had a gynecologist appointment. In reality, I was at Northgate Public Health, a county clinic on the east side of the city. I was there to get a copy of my medical records, a necessary step for the separation papers I was secretly drafting during my lunch breaks. Northgate was the kind of place where hope went to die in a plastic chair. The air smelled of antiseptic and wet wool. Babies were crying. Old men were coughing into handkerchiefs, and the clock on the wall was permanently stuck at 12:15. I was sitting in row 4, clutching my purse, trying to make myself invisible. That was when I saw him. He was curled up 2 seats away from me, a small, fragile shape beneath a dirty gray hoodie. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. He was asleep, his head laying against the hard plastic backrest, his mouth slightly open, but it wasn't his exhaustion that caught my eye. It was his feet. On his left foot, he wore a worn-out red sneaker, size 3 maybe. On his right foot was a brown loafer that looked like it belonged to a choir boy. 2 sizes too big, mismatched shoes. The universal sign code of a child who grabbed whatever he could find before running out the door. He was clutching a white plastic grocery bag to his chest like it contained gold bars. Through the thin plastic, I could see the outline of a toothbrush and what looked like a half-eaten loaf of bread. I watched him for 20 minutes. No adult came to check on him. No mother scolded him for sleeping. He was an island in a sea of sick people. Foster, a nurse called out, looking at a clipboard. I stood up at the sound of the voice. The boy jolted awake. His reaction wasn't normal. He didn't rub his eyes or yawn. He snapped into a state of high alert terror. His eyes darted around the room, scanning the exits, scanning the faces. He looked like a prey animal sensing a predator. The nurse, a harried woman with dark circles under her eyes, looked from me to the boy. She frowned. She had seen 1,000 neglected kids pass through these doors, and her patience for irresponsible parents had run out a decade ago. "Is he yours?" the nurse asked, her pen hovering over her clipboard. "You can't let him sleep across 3 chairs. Ma'am, we have patients standing." I opened my mouth to say, "No." I opened my mouth to say, "I have never seen this child before in my life." I opened my mouth to do the sensible, legal, safe thing. But then I looked at the boy. He was looking at me. He wasn't breathing. His knuckles were white around that plastic bag. He was shaking his head, a microscopic movement that only I could see. His eyes were wide, glassy with unshed tears, and they were screaming a silent plea that hit me harder than a physical blow. "Please." I knew what would happen if I said no. The nurse would call security. Security would call Child Protective Services. He would be put in a system that was overburdened and underfunded. He would be processed. He would be another file in a cabinet. And looking at the terror in his face, I knew he had run away from something bad. Sending him into the system might be sending him back to it. "Yes," I said. The word fell out of my mouth before my brain could stop it. "Yes, he's with me. I'm sorry. He's just tired." The nurse grunted, satisfied with the answer, and turned back to the reception desk. "Come sign these forms." I walked to the desk, signed my name with a trembling hand, and grabbed my records. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What did I just do? When I turned around, the boy was standing right behind me. He didn't speak. He just stepped into my shadow. We walked out of the clinic and into the gray afternoon. I walked to my car, a 10-year-old sedan that Derek deemed too embarrassing to drive, but allowed me to keep. I unlocked the doors. I stood there on the pavement looking at this stranger. "I can't take you," I said, my voice shaking. "My life is a mess. You need to go to the police. They can help you." The boy took a step back. "No police," he whispered. His voice was raspy, like he hadn't used it in days. "Please, no police. They'll call the house." "What house? Where are your parents?" "I don't have parents," he said. It wasn't a lie. I could feel the weight of the truth in it. "I just need to not be there." "Where is there?" He looked down at his mismatched shoes, the big house with the gates. It was vague. It was useless. But I looked at his wrists, thin and bruised, not from abuse, but from grabbing things, from climbing, from scraping against a rough world. I looked at the way he flinched when a car honked nearby. I thought about my empty apartment, a small studio I had secretly rented 2 weeks ago using the cash from the tampon box. It was my lifeboat. It wasn't furnished. It wasn't a home. "Get in," I said. That was the moment. That was the crossover point. I didn't drive him to the precinct. I drove him to a studio apartment on 4th Street that smelled of lemon cleaner and loneliness. For the next 3 weeks, we lived in a strange, quiet bubble. I called him Eli because he wouldn't tell me his name at first, and he seemed to like the sound of it. I didn't ask questions. I created a sanctuary of silence. I bought him clothes from a thrift store, shoes that matched, hoodies that were warm. I fed him soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. I tried to get him to talk about where he came from, but his memories were fractured, like a mirror smashed on the floor. There was a car, he told me one night over dinner. A black car and a man. Everyone called him sir, even the people who drove the car. "Did you call him Dad?" I asked gently. Eli frowned, concentrating hard, as if trying to see through a fog. I don't remember calling him that. I remember a library and a train, a toy train. He would get headaches when he tried to remember too much, pressing the heels of his hands into his eyes. So I stopped asking. I told myself I was giving him time to decompress before I did the responsible thing and found a social worker I could trust. I was lying to myself. I was keeping him because for the first time in years, I felt like I had a purpose that wasn't defined by Derek Vance. But secrets in a marriage like mine have a shelf life of 0. Derek found out on a Friday. He had tracked the mileage on my car. He had seen the withdrawals for children's clothing that I had foolishly made on the joint account when my cash ran out. He didn't come to the studio. He waited for me at the house I was trying to leave. When I walked in to get the last of my things, he was sitting in the dark living room holding a print out of my bank statement. "Who is he?" Derek asked. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, freezing in the hallway. "The boy, the neighbor near your little secret apartment, saw you. You're playing house with a stray kid. Piper, have you finally lost your mind? He has nowhere to go." "Derek, I'm helping him." Derek stood up and walked toward me. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You're kidnapping a minor. Do you know what I can do with this? I was going to offer you a settlement, but now I'm going to prove you're mentally unstable. I'm going to prove you're unfit. You won't get a dime, Piper. You'll be lucky if you don't go to prison." I ran out of the house. I drove back to the studio, my hands shaking so hard I could barely steer. I called my father. I needed an ally. I needed someone to tell me that saving a child wasn't a crime, that compassion wasn't insanity. I met my father at a diner halfway between his pristine suburb and my gritty reality. I told him everything. I told him about the clinic, about the mismatched shoes, about Derek's threats. My father didn't touch his coffee. He looked at me with that familiar disappointment, the one that had been eating away at my self-esteem since I was 12. "You have given Derek the gun to shoot you with." My father said. "I saved a boy, Dad." "You picked up a liability," he corrected. "A homeless child. Do you have any idea the diseases they carry, the trauma, and you brought this mess into a legal battle?" "Derek is right. You look unstable." "I'm not unstable. I'm human." "You are embarrassing," he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "I have a reputation in this town. If it gets out that my daughter is harboring a runaway and getting sued for it, I will not stand by you. Get rid of the boy. Drop him at a shelter. Apologize to Derek. Beg him to take you back." "I can't do that." "Then you are on your own," he said. "Don't come crying to me when you're on the street." He left $5 on the table for his coffee and walked out. That was the seed. That was the moment the door began to close. Long before he actually slammed it in my face in the rain. I went back to the studio. Eli was waiting for me. He had drawn a picture while I was gone. It was a picture of a tall building with clouds around the top. "Is this where you lived?" I asked. He shrugged. "Maybe." We stayed in that studio for another week, bleeding money, waiting for the axe to fall. Derek filed the motion. My accounts were frozen. The landlord gave us an eviction notice because Derek had called him and claimed I was running an illegal daycare. Everything was crumbling. My father was right about the consequences, but he was wrong about the morality. I looked at Eli eating a bowl of oatmeal, safe and warm, and I knew I would burn my whole life down again to keep him safe. But the safety was an illusion. That night, the night before the eviction, the night before, I would go to my father's house and be turned away. Eli had the nightmare. I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor. Eli was on the couch at 3 o'clock in the morning. A sound woke me. It was a high-pitched keen of pure distress. I scrambled up and ran to him. Eli was thrashing on the couch, tangling himself in the blanket. He was sweating, his hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes were squeezed shut, trapped in a terror I couldn't see. "No," he screamed. "No, don't. I won't tell." "Eli, Eli, wake up." I shook his shoulders gently. He didn't wake up. He grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong, digging his nails into my skin. He wasn't seeing me. He was seeing a ghost. "Julian!" he shouted. I froze. "Eli, Julian!" he screamed again, his voice breaking. "Don't let them take me. Dad, Julian, I'm here." He gasped, his eyes snapping open. He looked around the dark room, his chest heaving. He looked at me, confusion clouding his gaze. "Who is Julian?" I whispered, my heart racing. He blinked, the memory of the dream already fading, pulled back into the subconscious tide. He slumped back against the cushion, exhausted. "I don't know," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "I don't know anyone named Julian." But I knew he did. The name had been torn from him in the raw honesty of sleep. Julian? It wasn't just a name. Felt like a key. A key to a door I wasn't sure I should open. But now with Derek closing in and my father turning his back, it might be the only door we had left. For 10 days, I managed to build a house of cards that looked almost like a life. It was fragile, swaying in the wind, but it was standing. I had secured a temp position at a warehouse distribution center filing invoices. It was mind-numbing work that paid $15 an hour, but it was cash and nobody asked questions about my background check as long as I showed up on time. I found a way to enroll Eli in a free community learning program at the local library during the day. It wasn't school, but it was safe. He sat in a circle with other kids who had holes in their shoes and too much knowledge of the world in their eyes. He learned to read better. He ate a free lunch for a few hours a day. He was just a boy, not a fugitive. We were staying in a pay-by-week motel on the edge of the industrial district. The carpet smelled of stale beer and the walls were paper thin, but it had a lock. Every night I would come back with takeout soup, and Eli would show me the worksheets he had done. We would sit on the bed, and for a moment, the terror of the world outside would recede. But Derek was not done with me. He did not just want to win the divorce. He wanted to salt the earth where I stood. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was at the warehouse organizing a stack of shipping manifests. My supervisor, a gruff man named Miller, who usually ignored me, called me into his office. He didn't ask me to sit down. He was holding a piece of paper and his face was tight with anger. "Pack your things, Foster," he said. "What?" "Why, I finished the Q4 reports early." I stammered, my heart leaping into my throat. "We received an anonymous tip," Miller said, tossing the paper onto his desk. "Allegations of data theft from your previous employer. Corporate espionage. They sent proof that you're under investigation." I stared at the paper. It was a lie, a complete fabrication. But I knew the font. I knew the cadence of the legal jargon. It was Derek. He was sending emails to every temp agency and employer in the city, flagging my social security number. He was blacklisting me. "That is not true," I said, my voice rising. "My ex-husband is trying to ruin me. Please, you have to listen." "I don't have to listen to anything," Miller said, turning his back. "We don't need the drama. Get out." I was escorted off the property like a criminal. I stood in the parking lot, clutching my purse, and realized the house of cards had not just fallen. It had been set on fire. By Friday, the money was gone. The motel manager, a woman who had smiled at Eli 2 days prior, banged on our door at 10 o'clock in the morning. "Payment was due at 9, she said, chewing gum loudly. "You're out." "I just need one more day," I begged, blocking the view of the room where Eli was packing his small backpack. "I have an interview this afternoon. No pay, no stay." You have 5 minutes. We were on the street again. Desperation has a specific taste. It tastes like the metal of a wedding ring in your mouth as you use your teeth to pull it off your finger because your hands are too swollen from stress. I walked into a pawn shop on Broad Street. The man behind the counter looked at the ring, a white gold band with a modest diamond that I had once thought meant forever. $200, he said without looking up. It was appraised at $2,000, I argued, though the fight was already draining out of me. $200. Take it or leave it. I took it. $200 buying us food for a week or a roof for 2 nights. I chose food. Then I sold my laptop. It was my only connection to the outside world, my only way to look for jobs. But it was worth $300. That was $300 closer to survival. But money burns fast when you are homeless. A sandwich costs $12. A laundromat load costs $5. Bus fare costs $3. It bleeds away drip by drip. When the cash dwindled to double digits, we went to the shelter. It was a converted gymnasium in the basement of a church. It smelled of bleach and unwashed bodies. There were rows of CS separated by nothing but air and anxiety. I held Eli's hand so tight I thought I might break his fingers. Eyes down, I whispered to him, "Stay close." We were assigned 2 CS in the corner. I sat on the edge watching the room. There were mothers rocking crying babies, old women talking to themselves, and staff members walking around with clipboards, looking exhausted. I overheard 2 social workers talking near the coffee station. The mother in bed for 1 whispered, "She's unstable. We need to call CPS. You can't have a kid in this environment for more than 48 hours without a permanent address plan. It's policy." My blood ran cold. Policy. The same bureaucratic monster that Derek used as a weapon. If they found out I had no plan, no family, and no legal claim to Eli. Yet they would take him. They would put him in a foster home, and I would never see him again. I went back to the cot. Eli was staring at the ceiling, his body rigid. "Listen to me," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "We are playing a game, okay? It is a spy game." He looked at me, his eyes wide. "A spy game? Yes, we need a code. If we ever get separated, or if someone tries to take you, or if I tell you to run, you need to know the code." "What is the code?" "The code is Bluebird to the library." I squeezed his hand. "If I say that, or if you get lost, you go to the main library on Grant Avenue. You go to the children's section, the one with the beanbag chairs. You sit there and you wait for me. You do not go with police. You do not go with nice ladies who offer you candy. You wait for Piper. Do you understand?" Eli nodded solemnly. "Bluebird to the library. Good." That night, amidst the chorus of coughing and snoring strangers, Eli rolled over to face me. The fear from the first weeks had evolved into something else. A deep, brooding thoughtfulness. "I remember something else," he whispered. I brushed the hair off his forehead. "What do you remember?" "A room," he said, his eyes unfocused, looking into the middle distance. It was made of glass. All the walls were glass. I could see the clouds, and there were bookshelves, tall ones. They went all the way up. "That sounds beautiful," I said. "And a smell," he added. The one I think was my dad. He didn't smell like cigarettes or food. He smelled like wood, like the pencil shavings in the sharpener. Cedar, sandalwood, expensive cologne. This wasn't the memory of a child from the projects. Glass walls and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. That was penthouse architecture. "Do you remember his face?" I asked. "No," Eli sighed, frustration creeping in. "Just his hands." He had a gold watch. Ticked really loud. The next day, we left the shelter early. I couldn't risk the social workers coming back. We spent the day moving, walking, sitting in parks until the police rolled by, then walking again. We were ghosts haunting the city we lived in. By evening, the hunger was a physical pain, a sharp cramp in the center of my stomach. We found a soup kitchen near the river that was serving dinner. It was crowded, loud, and chaotic. We got a tray with lukewarm stew and a piece of bread. We found a spot at a long communal table. Across the room, mounted high on the wall, was a television set tuned to the evening news. The volume was low, but the captions were scrolling across the bottom. I was breaking off a piece of bread for Eli when he stopped. He dropped his spoon, clattered loudly against the plastic tray. He was staring at the TV. I turned to look on the screen. There was footage of a massive gleaming skyscraper in Chicago. The headline read, "Vail Meridian Group announces record quarterly profits amidst leadership speculation." The camera cut to a photo of a man. He was older, distinguished, with silver hair and eyes that looked like steel. Eli started to shake. It wasn't a shiver from the cold. It was a vibration that started in his core and radiated out. He gripped the edge of the table. "Eli." I touched his shoulder. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He was locked on the screen. The news anchor was talking about Silas Vail, the founder, and the tragedy that had struck the family almost 2 years ago. The screen flashed a photo of a younger man, his son Julian Vail, who had vanished. Eli made a sound, a small wounded noise in the back of his throat. He looked like he was being physically struck by the images. "We have to go," I said, sensing a meltdown coming. I didn't want a scene. I grabbed our bags and pulled him up. He stumbled after me, his head still turned toward the TV until we were out the door. Outside, the evening had turned bitter. The wind was howling, cutting through our inadequate coats. The rain had started again, a miserable drizzle that soaked everything instantly. We huddled under the awning of a closed electronics store, trying to escape the downpour. I knelt down to zip up Eli's jacket. He was pale, his breathing shallow. "Eli, look at me," I said. "What happened in there? Did you see something scary?" He looked at me. The fog in his eyes, the confusion that had been there for months was gone. In its place was a terrifying clarity. He looked older. He looked burdened. He reached out and took my face in his small, cold hands. "Miss Piper," he said. His voice was steady, clearer than I had ever heard it. "I am not Eli." My heart stopped. "What?" "The man on the TV," he said. "The man with the watch. That's him. That's the wood smell." I stared at him, the rain drumming a frantic rhythm on the metal awning above us. That was Silas Vail. "He's one of the richest men in the country." "Eli." "He is my dad," the boy whispered. I waited for the punchline. I waited for the childish retraction, but he just stared at me. And I saw the resemblance. I saw the shape of the jawline from the grainy news photo. I saw the steel in the eyes. "Miss Piper," he said again, and the words fell like stones. "My dad is a billionaire." Couldn't breathe. The world tilted on its axis. If this was true, I wasn't just harboring a runaway. I was holding the lost heir to an empire. I was in the middle of something so much bigger and more dangerous than a divorce. I opened my mouth to speak, to ask him if he was sure, but a sound cut through the noise of the rain. Ding. My phone. My cheap burner phone that only 3 people had the number for the temp agency. My father and Derek. I pulled it out of my pocket. The screen glowed blue in the darkness. It was a text message. Unknown number, no area code. I read the words and the blood drained from my face, leaving me colder than the rain ever could. "Do not find Vail. You will regret it." I looked up at the boy. I looked at the dark street. We weren't just invisible anymore. We were being watched. The glow of the library computer monitor was the only light I could stand. Outside, the morning was gray and hostile, But inside the main branch of the public library, the air was still and smelled of dust and decaying paper. I had parked Eli Julian. I had to start thinking of him as Julian in the children's section with a stack of picture books and a strict instruction to keep his head down. I sat at a terminal in the far corner, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I typed the name Silas Vale. The internet did not just return results. It screamed them. Silas Vale was not just a billionaire. He was an industry. Vale Meridian Group controlled shipping lanes, pharmaceutical logistics, and private security contracting. But I scrolled past the stock prices and the corporate puff pieces. I was looking for the cracks. I added a second search term, son. The screen filled with headlines from 18 months ago. Erdevale Empire vanishes from private school. Kidnapping fears mount as days turn to weeks for Julian Vale. Search for Julian Vale hits dead end. I clicked on an article from the Chicago Tribune. The date was over a year old. There was a photo of a boy. He was wearing a school blazer with a crest on the pocket. His hair neatly combed. His smile tentative. It was a polished studio-lit version of the child I had been feeding soup to for weeks. The eyes were the same. The shape of the ears was the same. I scrolled down to the description provided by the authorities. Male, 6 years old at time of disappearance. Light brown hair, hazel eyes, distinguishing marks, a small irregular birthmark on the inner left wrist, roughly the shape of a star. My breath hitched in my throat. I looked over the top of the monitor toward the children's section. Eli was sitting in a beanbag chair, his sleeves pulled down over his hands as they always were. He had been doing that since the day I met him. I thought it was just a nervous tic, a way to keep warm. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of water, and walked over to him. Eli, I whispered, kneeling beside the bean bag. Can I see your arm? The left one, he flinched, pulling his arm tight against his chest. Why? I just need to check something. Please, I promise I won't hurt you. He hesitated, studying my face for any sign of betrayal. Slowly, agonizingly, he extended his left arm. I took his small hand in mine and gently pushed back the cuff of the oversized fleece sweater I had bought him at the thrift store. There it was, just below the palm on the pale skin of his inner wrist, a reddish-brown pigmentation. It wasn't a perfect star, but it was jagged with 5 distinct points. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. The room spun. This wasn't a fairy tale. This wasn't a child's imagination coping with trauma. This was $5 million in reward money sitting in a beanbag chair. This was the missing piece of a national tragedy. And someone had texted me, "Do not find Vale. Miss Piper." Eli asked, his voice trembling. Is it bad? No, I lied, pulling his sleeve back down to cover the mark. No, it's not bad. It just means you were telling the truth. I went back to the computer to log out, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached for the mouse, but my hand froze. In the reflection of the dark monitor screen, I saw him 3 rows back in the periodical section. A man was holding a newspaper, but he wasn't reading it. His eyes were fixed on me. He was wearing a nondescript beige jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. He wasn't a security guard. He wasn't a librarian. He was static. He was waiting. The text message burned in my pocket. You will regret it. I didn't log out. I didn't grab my printed pages. I turned around, grabbed my purse, and walked briskly back to Eli. Code Bluebird, I whispered, hoisting him up. We are leaving now. But I didn't finish the book now, Eli. I didn't go to the front doors. That was where the man would expect us to go. I steered us toward the fire exit near the bathrooms. It was alarmed, but I knew from my days of killing time in libraries that the staff usually deactivated the alarm on the loading dock door until noon for deliveries. It was a gamble. We pushed through the heavy metal door. Silence. No alarm. We burst out into the alleyway, the cold air slapping my face. Run, I said. We ran down the alley, splashing through puddles, emerging onto a busy side street. A city bus was pulling away from the curb. I banged on the door until the driver, looking annoyed, hissed the hydraulics open. We scrambled on. I didn't look back to see if the man in the beige jacket had followed. I paid the fare $3 we couldn't spare, and we collapsed into the back seat. I made us switch buses 3 times in the next 2 hours. First to the north side, then a loop back toward the river, then finally onto a line that headed toward the bus terminal. I was trying to scrub our trail, driving myself crazy with paranoia. Was that blue sedan following us? Was that woman on the phone talking about us? We ended up in a small, greasy spoon diner near the interstate. It was the kind of place where the coffee tasted like battery acid and nobody looked you in the eye. I ordered a grilled cheese for Eli and a glass of water for myself. "You're scared," Eli said, picking at the crust of his bread. "I'm cautious," I corrected. "There is a difference." He looked at me, and for a second the child vanished and the victim appeared. "I heard them," he said softly, "before I ran away. The men in the room." "What men? The ones who took you?" He nodded. "They were arguing. One of them said he said I was the key. He said, 'The boy is the key to the trust. Without him, the lock stays shut.'" He looked up at me, his hazel eyes filled with a confusion that broke my heart. "Miss Piper, I am not a key. I am a boy." Why did they say that? A chill went down my spine. A trust fund. Of course, it wasn't just a kidnapping for ransom. If it was ransom, they would have asked for money 18 months ago. This was corporate. This was inheritance. Someone needed Julian Vale out of the way, but not dead. Or maybe they needed him alive but hidden to leverage something. "You are not a key," I said fiercely, reaching across the sticky table to squeeze his hand. "You are Julian, and we are going to fix this." I needed to make a call. I couldn't go to the police. The text message implied surveillance, and if Derek was involved, as his sudden knowledge of my finances suggested, he might have already poisoned the well with the local cops painting me as a kidnapper. I needed to go to the source. I went to the payphone in the back of the diner. It was an antique covered in graffiti, but it had a dial tone. I fed it quarters. I dialed the number for Vale Meridian Group headquarters in Chicago. I had memorized it from the library screen. "Vale Meridian. How may I direct your call?" The voice was smooth, professional, and completely detached. "I need to speak to Silas Vale," I said. My voice sounded thin and desperate, even to my own ears. "Mr. Vale does not take unsolicited calls." "Is this regarding a business proposal?" "No," I said, gripping the receiver. "This is regarding his son. This is regarding Julian." There was a pause, a click. Then a different voice came on the line. Harder. "Ma'am, making false reports regarding the Vale family is a federal offense. We have your location traced to a payphone in Ohio. If you call again, we will dispatch local authorities." The line went dead. I stood there listening to the drone of the dial tone. They thought I was a crank, a nut job looking for a payout. They had probably received 1,000 calls like this in the last 18 months. I couldn't penetrate the fortress by phone. I walked back to the booth. Eli was scraping the last of the cheese off the plate. "We are going on a trip," I said. "Where were Chicago?" "To find your dad." I had $70 left. 2 bus tickets to Chicago would cost $58. That left $12 for food and emergencies. It was suicide. It was madness. But staying here with the man in the beige jacket and the text messages was a death sentence. We waited until dark to move to the Greyhound station. The atmosphere there was grim, a purgatory of transient souls. I bought the tickets with cash. The bus didn't leave until 4 in the morning. We had 6 hours to kill. We couldn't stay at the station. It was too exposed. I knew a place, a temporary emergency shelter that didn't ask for ID if you came in after midnight. It was a risk, but we needed to rest before the journey. The shelter was a converted warehouse subdivided into cubicles with hanging sheets. We found an empty corner. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor using my backpack as a desk and wrote a letter to Silas Vale. If you are reading this, I have probably been arrested or removed. My name is Piper Foster. I did not take your son. I found him sleeping in a clinic in Ohio. He has a star-shaped birthmark on his left wrist. He remembers the smell of cedarwood. He is scared. Please do not let them hurt him. I folded the letter and put it in my inside pocket. It was my insurance policy. If security tackled me before I could speak, I would throw this at them. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the air in the warehouse shifted. It wasn't the draft. It was a presence. I looked up. Standing at the entrance of our cubicle, holding back the hanging sheet with one hand, was Derek. He looked out of place in his designer jeans and leather jacket, surrounded by the destitute. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. He looked like a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. My stomach dropped through the floor. "How did you find us?" "You're predictable, Piper," he said, stepping inside. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at Eli, who was sleeping curled up in a ball. Derek's eyes gleamed with a greed that was naked and terrifying. "And you have a habit of using that old debit card to verify your identity for library computer access. Did you forget I still get the alerts on the joint account?" I stood up, placing myself between him and the boy. "Get out, Derek. Leave us alone." He laughed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, tapping one against his palm. "Leave you? Why would I do that? You're sitting on a winning lottery ticket." "Piper, I saw the news. I put 2 and 2 together. The kid isn't a stray. He's a golden goose. He is a child. He is $5 million. Derek corrected, his voice dropping to a hiss. "And you're going to give me my share? I figure half is fair. Spousal support, right? You're delusional. I'm taking him to his father." Derek took a step closer, invading my space. He smelled of expensive cologne and rot. "You're not taking him anywhere unless I say so. You think you can just walk into Vale Tower? You need me. You need a man to do the talking. Otherwise, you're just a crazy woman who kidnapped a billionaire's kid. Who do you think they'll believe? The successful portfolio manager or the homeless ex-wife?" He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. I flinched, but I didn't back down. "So, here is the deal," Derek said, his smile widening into a rectus of malice. "We do this together, or I make a phone call right now and tell the police exactly where the kidnapper is hiding. Your choice, Piper, but decide fast." The bus to Chicago leaves in 50 minutes. The lobby of the Vale Meridian Tower was not designed for people like us. It was a cathedral of capitalism, a soaring atrium of glass and polished black marble that made you feel small, insignificant, and poor. The air was filtered and scented with something crisp, like ozone and money. I was wearing jeans that hadn't been washed in 4 days and a coat that smelled of the Greyhound bus seat I had slept in for 6 hours. Eli was gripping my hand so hard his fingernails were digging into my palm, his other hand clutching the strap of his backpack as if it contained the nuclear codes. We had left Derek behind in Ohio. It had cost me the last of my pride to slip away from him in the bus station bathroom, abandoning my bag to create a decoy while Eli and I scrambled onto a different carrier at the last second. I knew he was coming. Predator like Derek doesn't just lose the scent. But for this moment, right now, it was just me, the boy, and the terrifying expanse of this floor. People in suits tailored to within an inch of their lives walked past us, their eyes sliding over us like we were invisible or worse, a stain on the architecture. I walked straight to the security desk. It was a slab of granite the size of a small car. The guard behind it was massive, his neck thick, his expression bored. He didn't look up as we approached. "Deliveries are on the loading dock around the back on Wacker Drive," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I'm not a delivery," I said. My voice was cleared my throat and tried to summon the spine I had found in the library. "I am here to see Silas Vale." The guard finally looked up. He took in my messy hair, the dark circles under my eyes, and Eli's oversized sneakers. He let out a short, dismissive breath through his nose. "Mr. Vale is not in and he doesn't take walk-ins. You need to leave, ma'am." "Now, I'm not leaving," I said. I pulled Eli slightly in front of me, though he tried to shrink back. "Look at him." "Ma'am, I am going to ask you once to step back," the guard said, his hand moving toward the radio on his belt. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for solicitation." I felt the adrenaline surge, hot and sharp. I didn't have time for bureaucracy. I didn't have time to be polite. "I think I found Julian Vale," I said. The words didn't come out as a shout. They came out flat and hard, dropping into the space between us like a heavy stone. The effect was instantaneous. The guard's hand froze on his belt. The boredom vanished from his eyes, replaced by a sudden, razor-sharp focus. Two other guards who had been standing near the elevators turned their heads in unison. The silence that fell over that section of the lobby was absolute. Even the receptionist typing on her phone stopped mid-tap. "What did you say?" the guard asked, his voice lower now. "Dangerous." "You heard me," I said, holding his gaze. "Call upstairs. Tell them a woman is here with a boy who matches the description. Tell them he remembers the library." The guard looked at Eli, really looked at him. He saw the hazel eyes. He saw the hair. He picked up the phone on the desk, his movement slow and deliberate, never taking his eyes off us. "We have a code gray at the main desk." He spoken to the receiver. "Notify the executive office." "Yes." Now, 5 minutes later, we were not in the lobby. We were in a holding room on the 42nd floor. The room was soundproof, windowless, and furnished with a single glass table and 4 leather chairs. It was cold. Everything in this building was cold. Eli sat in one of the chairs, his legs dangling, unable to touch the floor. He was trembling. "Are they going to arrest us?" he whispered. "No," I said, pacing the length of the room. "No, we are doing the right thing. Just remember what we talked about. Tell the truth. Only the truth." I was trying to convince myself as much as him. I felt like an imposter. What if I was wrong? What if the birth arc was a coincidence? What if the memories were just fragments of a movie he had seen? I was betting my freedom on the fractured psyche of a traumatized child. The door opened. It wasn't security this time. The man who walked in looked like the photos I had seen, but stripped of all the retouching and golden lighting. Silas Vale was a tall man, but he carried himself with a stoop, as if gravity pulled harder on him than on other people. His suit was immaculate, charcoal gray, but his face was a ruin. His cheeks were hollow, his skin gray and papery. His eyes were red-rimmed, surrounded by a web of deep lines that spoke of 18 months of sleepless nights. He stopped 3 feet from the door. He didn't look at me, his gaze locked onto Eli like a laser. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Eli looked back. He didn't run to him. He didn't scream, "Daddy!" He just stared, his small hands gripping the leather armrests of the chair. Silas took a step forward, then stopped. He was afraid. I could see it in the way his hands shook at his sides. He was terrified that this was another false hope, another knife twisting in the wound. "Who are you?" Silas asked. His voice was rasping, and used. He was speaking to Eli, not me. Eli swallowed hard. I am Eli. Silas flinched. The name clearly meant nothing to him. The hope in his eyes began to dim, replaced by a familiar, crushing disappointment. He turned his head slightly toward me, his expression hardening. I have had 12 people in this office in the last year claiming to have my son, Silas said, the ice creeping into his tone. One woman brought a child she had dyed the hair of to match the photos. Another man used deep fake audio. If this is a game, madam, I will destroy you. It's not a game, I said, stepping between him and the door. Look at his wrist. The left one. Silas froze. He looked back at the boy. Julian, he whispered. It was barely a sound. Eli looked at the man's face. He tilted his head, studying the lines, the gray hair. Then his eyes drifted down to Silas's wrist to the gold watch. You smell like wood, Eli said softly. Silas stopped breathing, and Eli frowned, screwing up his face in concentration. And in the glass room at the house you have a train. A red train on the shelf, the one that puffs real smoke when you put the oil in it. The silence that followed was deafening. Silas Vale didn't just react. He collapsed. It wasn't a physical fall, but an emotional implosion. The steel tycoon, the billionaire, the man of iron, simply broke. His knees buckled slightly, and he caught himself on the back of a chair. A sound escaped him, a sob that was half laugh, half scream. The Union Pacific. Silas choked out, tears instantly flooding his eyes. The vintage O-gauge. Nobody knew about the smoke. We only ran it once. He fell to his knees. He didn't care about the suit. He didn't care about the dignity. He crawled the last 2 feet and reached out, his hands hovering over Eli's face, afraid to touch him, afraid he would vanish like mist. Julian, he wept. Oh God, Julian. Eli didn't pull away. He reached out and touched Silas's wet cheek. You look sad, Eli said. It was the moment, the undeniable, earth-shattering moment of reunion. And then the door banged open. Step away from the boy. Step back. The spell shattered. 3 people marched into the room. Leading them was a woman who looked like a weapon in a skirt suit. She had blonde hair cut in a sharp bob, glasses that looked expensive enough to buy my car, and a face that had forgotten how to smile. This was Marion Klein. I didn't know her name then, but I knew her type. She was the fixer, the shark. Silas, get up, she commanded, her voice sharp. She motioned to the 2 security officers behind her. Secure the room. Separate them. It's him, Marion, Silas said, looking up, tears streaming down his face. He knows about the train. Scammers are getting better, Silas, Marion said coldly. She turned her gaze on me. It was like being looked at by a reptile. Who is she? Why is she holding his hand? I'm Piper Foster, I said, standing my ground as a security guard moved to stand between me and Eli. I brought him home. You brought a potential asset into a secure facility without vetting. Marion snapped. She didn't see a boy. She saw a liability. She saw a lawsuit. She's homeless. Look at her clothes. We have no idea where she got him or what she's done to him to prep him for this. I haven't done anything. I protested. We need a DNA test immediately. Marion barked at an assistant who was hovering in the hallway. And get this woman out of the room. I want her vetted, fingerprinted, and run through every database we have. If she kidnapped him for the reward, I want her in cuffs within the hour. No! Eli screamed. He scrambled off the chair and latched onto my leg. No, don't take Miss Piper. Silas stood up, wiping his face. He looked from Marion to me and then to his son, clinging to a strange, dirty woman. The conflict in his eyes was painful to watch. He wanted his son, but he had spent 18 months being tortured by false leads. His logical brain was wearing with his heart. Silas, she is a risk factor, Mary pressed, sensing his hesitation. We need to secure Julian alone for his safety. I am not leaving him, I said, putting my hand on Eli's head. And he is not leaving me. Not until he feels safe. Silas looked at Eli. He saw the way the boy buried his face in my coat. He saw the absolute terror in his son's eyes when the guards stepped closer. Stop, Silas said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of authority again. Silas, Marion started. I said stop, he roared, turning on her. Look at him, Marion. He is terrified. He trusts her. He looked at me for the first time. He really saw me. He didn't see a homeless woman. He saw the person his son had chosen. Run the DNA test, Silas said, his voice shaking but firm. Do it here. Do it now. But she stays. If he wants her, she stays. Marion pursed her lips, furious, but she nodded. Fine, but she doesn't leave this floor. The next hour was a blur of swabs, forms, and hostile glares. A doctor came in to take samples from both Silas and Eli. Through it all, I sat in the corner, holding Eli's hand. Silas sat across from us, watching. He couldn't take his eyes off the boy. He looked like a man starving to death, who had been set before a banquet, but was afraid to eat. While we waited for the rush results, a woman in a beige silk blouse approached me. She introduced herself as the Director of Communications. She didn't give her name, just her title. She sat down next to me, smelling of lavender and condescension. Miss Foster, she said, her voice a hushed conspiratorial whisper. This is a very delicate situation. The stock market is volatile. A story like this, it gets messy. What do you want? I asked, tired. We are prepared to offer you a generous compensation package, she said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. It was a check. I didn't look at the number, but there were a lot of zeros. For your time and for your discretion, we can set you up in a nice hotel, a flight to anywhere you want to go. You sign a non-disclosure agreement. You leave quietly, and you let the family heal in private. I looked at the check. It was $50,000. It was more money than I had made in 2 years. Could fix everything. I could get a house. I could get away from Derek. I looked at Eli. He was showing Silas the hole in the elbow of his hoodie, explaining how he got it climbing a fence. He looked over at me, checking to make sure I was still there. I pushed the check back. I am not selling him, I said loud enough for Silas to hear. I am not leaving until I know he is safe. Keep your money. The woman blinked, surprised. People didn't usually say no to veil money. 2 hours later, the doctor returned. He didn't need to speak. The look on his face said everything. He nodded to Silas. Silas let out a breath that sounded like a soul returning to a body. He closed his eyes. It's him. The room exhaled, but the tension didn't vanish. It shifted. Now the reality set in. Julian Vale was back. The heir was returned. We need to move them, Marion announced, already on her phone. The press will be swarming the lobby in 10 minutes if there was a leak. We can't take them to the estate yet. It's not secure enough until we sweep it. The safe house on the North Shore, Silas said. He stood up and walked over to us. He didn't look at me with warmth, but he looked at me with respect. M. Foster, you will come with us. Julian insists. We were ushered down a service elevator to a private garage in the basement. An armored SUV was waiting. I climbed in back with Eli. Silas sat in the front. The convoy moved out, emerging into the late afternoon gloom of Chicago. I looked out the tinted back window as we pulled onto the highway. The city was a blur of gray and steel. I felt a strange sense of unreality. I was in a billionaire's car. I had one, hadn't I? Then I saw it 3 cars back. A black sedan. It wasn't a police car. It wasn't a taxi. It was a luxury car. Sleek and aggressive. Changed lanes when we changed lanes. It sped up when we sped up. It wasn't hiding. I leaned forward, tapping Silas on the shoulder. "Mr. Vale, what is it?" he asked, distracted. "That car," I pointed, "the black one, has been with us since the garage." Silas looked in the side mirror. His face went pale. "Marion," he said into his headset, "why is the security detail so close? We only have one lead car." "Silas." Marion's voice crackled in the speaker. "We don't have a tail car." Silas went rigid. The black car surged forward, pulling into the lane beside us. The window didn't roll down. We couldn't see the driver. It just hovered there. A dark, silent shark swimming alongside us. It was a message. "We know. Drive." Silas ordered the driver, his voice tight with panic. "Get us off the highway now." The world did not wait for the truth. It invented one. We were sequestered in a secure, safe house on the North Shore, a sprawling modernist fortress of glass and concrete overlooking the churning gray water of Lake Michigan. It was a prison disguised as a luxury retreat. Inside, it was silent, sterile, and safe. Outside, the media storm had made landfall, and I was the eye of the hurricane. The morning after our arrival, I made the mistake of turning on the television in the guest suite. The headline was in bold red letters. "Billionaire heir found savior or kidnapper." The screen flashed a grainy image taken from a security camera, likely the one at the bus station or the diner. It showed me disheveled, hair matted, gripping Eli's arm. But they had cropped the photo. They had cut out Eli's face to protect his identity, which was standard. But they had also cut out the context. They had zoomed in on my hand gripping his arm in the low-resolution still. It didn't look like protection. It looked like force. It looked like abduction. "Who is the mystery woman found with Julian Vale?" the anchor asked, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Sources say she is a homeless drifter with a history of financial instability and erratic behavior. Is this a rescue or a ransom gone wrong?" I turned off the TV, my hand shaking so hard I dropped the remote. I went online. It was worse on social media. The court of public opinion had already convened, deliberated, and sentenced me. "She looks like a junkie." One comment read, "Why did she wait 3 weeks to bring him in? She was negotiating. Check her background. Nobody helps a rich kid for free." I had no lawyer. I had no publicist. I had no voice. I was just a woman in a borrowed sweater, trapped in a house with people who viewed me as a biological hazard. Then the second blow landed. My phone buzzed. It was a Google alert I had set up for my own name years ago and forgotten about. A new article had just been published on the Daily Scoop, a notorious tabloid blog that thrived on destroying lives for clicks. "Exclusive ex-husband reveals dark past of Vale mystery woman." I clicked the link, my stomach churning. There was Derek's face. He wasn't hiding in a shelter anymore. He was sitting in what looked like a hotel room, wearing a fresh shirt, looking solemn and concerned. Piper has always been obsessed with wealth. Derek was quoted as saying she had a fixation on the Vale family specifically. She used to talk about how easy it would be to just take something from them. I tried to get her help. I tried to save our marriage. But when she started bringing strange children home, I knew she had snapped. She is dangerous. She is mentally unstable. Lies. It was all lies. He was painting a portrait of a monster using the pigments of my life. He was taking my poverty, my struggles, and twisting them into a motive. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The walls of the safe house were closing in. I needed an anchor, I needed someone from my before life to stand up and say, "This isn't her. She is a good person." I dialed my father's number. It rang 3 times. "Hello." His voice was guarded. "Dad?" I said, tears pricking my eyes. "Dad, have you seen the news? Derek is lying? You have to help me. You know I didn't kidnap him. I came to you that first night." There was a pause, a long, cold silence that stretched across the miles. "I saw the news." "Piper," he said finally, "I saw my surname dragged through the mud on national television because of you. Dad, please just tell the reporters the truth. Tell them I tried to get help. Tell them Derek is abusive. I will do no such thing." He snapped. "I told you to leave that boy. I told you to walk away. You chose this circus. You chose to humiliate me. I saved a child's life. You destroyed my reputation. I have clients calling me asking if my daughter is a felon. I cannot be associated with this. I will not be dragged down by your poor decisions, Dad. In fact," he continued, his voice dropping to that terrifyingly calm register, "my lawyer filed a petition this morning, a restraining order, and a formal request to disassociate. I am legally distancing myself from you. Piper, do not call me again. Do not come to the house. If you do, I will have you arrested for harassment." The line went dead. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone slipping from my fingers. I wasn't just downed anymore. I was being erased. My own father had looked at the fire consuming me and decided to pour gasoline on it to save his own skin. A small sound from the doorway made me jump. Eli Julian was standing there. He was wearing clean clothes now, expensive clothes that a stylist had brought in an hour ago. He looked like a veil, but his eyes were still the eyes of the boy who had slept in a train station. "Did your dad get mad?" he asked softly. He had heard. He had heard the shouting. "It's complicated, honey," I said, wiping my face quickly. "It's my fault," he whispered, looking down at his new loafers. "Because you helped me. Now everyone hates you." "No," I said, rushing over to him and kneeling down. I grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at me. "No, listen to me. None of this is your fault. The people who are lying, they are the bad guys. You are the good thing. Finding you was the best thing I ever did. Do not ever think you are the reason for this." He threw his arms around my neck and buried his face in my shoulder. I held him, rocking him back and forth, trying to absorb his guilt so it wouldn't poison him. Later that afternoon, the tension in the house reached a breaking point. Silas Vale called a meeting in the library. The room was vast, lined with books that looked like they had never been read, with a view of the gray lake that felt like an oil painting of depression. Silas was pacing. Marion Klein was sitting at a table with a laptop, typing furiously. "The narrative is spiraling," Marion said without looking up. "The obsessed kidnapper angle is gaining traction. We need to cut the cord. Silas, we need to distance the family from Ms. Foster immediately." "She brought him back." "Marion," Silas said, running a hand through his hair. He looked exhausted, torn between gratitude and public relations. "She is a PR disaster," Mary encountered. "Look at this. A credit report just surfaced. Someone opened 3 credit cards in her name last week and maxed them out on cash advances. Her credit score is in the double digits. She looks desperate. Desperate people do desperate things." My head snapped up. "What? I didn't open any cards." "The record says otherwise," Marion said coldly. "Identity theft or not, it looks bad. It looks like you needed money fast. It was a setup. Someone, Derek or whoever was pulling his strings, had stolen my identity to dirty my financials right before the story broke. They were thorough. They were burying me under a mountain of fabricated debt and character assassination. Silas Marion said, "We need to take Julian to the main estate in the Hamptons tonight. The press doesn't know about it. We can sequester him there. Let him heal and control the story." "I agree," Silas said. He turned to me. "Miss Foster, we will arrange a secure hotel for you here in Chicago. We will handle your legal fees, but Julian needs to come with us alone." "No," a small voice said. We all turned. Julian was standing by the bookshelf, clutching a toy train engine. "I'm not going," he said. "Julian, son," Silas said gently, walking toward him. "It's for your safety. The reporters are bad people. We need to go where they can't find us." "I'm not going without Piper," Julian said. His voice was shaking, but his chin was up. "She knows the code. She knows Bluebird to the library. You don't know the code. We can learn the code," Silas pleaded. "No," Julian shouted, stepping back. "She saved me when the bad men came. She saved me. If she doesn't go, I don't go." Silas stopped. He looked at his son. Really looked at him. He saw the bond. It wasn't just affection. It was a lifeline. Julian was drowning in trauma, and I was the only raft he had. To take me away now would be to push him back under. "He needs her," Silas said quietly. "Silas, you cannot be serious," Marion hissed. "She is a liability. She is his security blanket," Silas said, turning to face his lawyer. "And right now, my son's mental state is more important than the stock price. She comes with us." Marion slammed her laptop shut. "This is a mistake." "It's my mistake to make," Silas said. The room fell into a heavy, uncomfortable silence. I looked at Julian and tried to smile, tried to tell him with my eyes that I wasn't going anywhere, but inside I was terrified. How long could Silas hold off his advisors? How long before the evidence against me became too overwhelming to ignore? Then the phone on the desk rang. It was the secure landline. Silas picked it up. "Dale." He listened. His face changed. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a sharp predatory alertness. He looked at me, then back at the phone. "Say that again," Silas said. Slowly, he listened for another minute, his eyes narrowing. He put the phone down slowly. "Who was that?" Marion asked. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," Silas said. His voice was low, vibrating with a suppressed rage I hadn't heard before. "Agent Miller, what do they want?" "We already gave our statement. They found something," Silas said. He walked over to the window and looked out at the gray water. "They found a connection. They have been monitoring the chatter since the news broke. They flagged a series of calls made 18 months ago. Around the time Julian was taken, he turned around and looked straight at me. The calls were from a burner phone," Silas said. "But they traced the location data of the purchase, and they cross-referenced it with new financial records they just subpoenaed." And Marion asked impatient. "The kidnapping wasn't random." Silas said it was a contract job, and the man who facilitated the initial handoff, the man who was paid to drive the car that day. He paused, and the room seemed to get colder. "It wasn't a stranger," Silas said. "The FBI believes there is a significant link between the abduction team and Derek Vance." My blood froze. Derek, my husband, my boring, controlling portfolio manager husband, was involved in the kidnapping of the century. "He didn't just find you by accident, Piper," Silas said, his eyes hard. "He wasn't tracking you to save his marriage. He was tracking you because he was cleaning up a loose end. He needed the boy back to finish the job." The Cook County Courthouse was a fortress of limestone and indifference. Room 304, where the emergency custody hearing was held, smelled of floor wax and the specific metallic anxiety that comes when the fate of a child is decided by people who have never met him. Outside the press was a hydra with 50 heads, screaming questions. Inside it was silent as a tomb. I sat at a small table on the left. No lawyer, no advocate, Just me in a suit Silas's assistant had bought for me an hour ago. Charcoal gray, ill-fitting at the shoulders, making me look like a child playing dress-up. Across the aisle, Silas Vale sat flanked by 3 attorneys. They looked like sharks in Italian wool. Marion Clean was at the helm, arranging her files with the precision of a surgeon preparing to amputate. The judge, Honorable Justice Vance, no relation to Derek, thank God, was a woman with eyes that had seen too many lies to be impressed by money or tears. She peered over her glasses at the room. We are here to determine the temporary placement of the minor. Julian Vale, she said, her voice was dry, stripping the emotion from the air. Given the unusual circumstances of his recovery and the conflicting reports regarding his caretaker, Ms. Foster, the court must decide whether the child remains in the custody of his biological father or is placed in protective state care pending a full investigation. State care. The words hung there like a threat. Marion Klein stood up. Your Honor, the facts are simple. Mr. Vale is the biological father. He has the means, the security, and the unwavering desire to care for his son. The boy has been missing for 18 months. He requires stability, top-tier medical attention, and a secure environment. Ms. Foster, while perhaps well-intentioned, is currently homeless, unemployed, and facing allegations of financial impropriety. To leave the child with her or even allow her access presents a significant emotional risk and instability. She didn't call me a criminal. She didn't have to. She painted a picture of a chaotic, broken woman who was a danger to a fragile boy. It was elegant. It was brutal. M. Foster, the judge asked, do you have representation? No, Your Honor, I said, standing up. My knees shook, but I forced my hands to stay flat on the table. I speak for myself. Proceed. I looked at Julian. He was sitting on a bench behind Silas, swinging his legs, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. He didn't care about the law. He just wanted to know who was going to tuck him in tonight. I don't have a mansion, I began. My voice wavered, then strengthened. I don't have a security team, but for the last month, I am the only one who knew his favorite color is green. I am the one who held him when he woke up screaming from nightmares about the bad men. I found him sleeping on a plastic chair in a clinic with mismatched shoes because he had run so far he forgot what he was wearing. I fed him before I fed myself. I sold my wedding ring to buy him a warm coat. I didn't know he was a billionaire. I just knew he was a boy who needed to be safe. I took a breath. The room was quiet. Mr. Vale offers him a house, I said, looking at Silas. I offer him a home. Even if that home is a motel room or a bus seat, he trusts me. If you take him away from me now, you aren't protecting him. You are breaking him all over again. The judge looked at me for a second. The mask of judicial indifference slipped. Then the door opened. Calling witness Derek Vance, the bailiff announced. My stomach dropped. Derek walked in. He was wearing his good suit, the navy one he wore to impress clients. He walked with a practiced humility, head bowed slightly, looking like a man burdened by a heavy moral duty. He took the stand. He swore to tell the truth, and then he began to lie. Mr. Vance, Marion Clean asked. She had called him. Why would Silas's lawyer call him? Can you describe your ex-wife's behavior in the weeks leading up to the boy's discovery? Erratic, Derek said, looking at the jury box. Even though there was no jury, she was obsessed with money. She kept talking about a big break. When she brought the boy home, I told her to call the police. She refused. She said he was her ticket. She said she was going to milk this for everything. It was worth. A murmur went through the room. I stood up. That is a lie. You told me to throw him out. Order, the judge snapped. Sit down, Miss Foster. Derek looked at me with sad eyes. I just want her to get help, Your Honor. and I want that boy to be safe. I worry she brainwashed him. Silas Vale had been silent. He had been watching Derek with the intensity of a hawk circling a field mouse. Suddenly, he leaned over and whispered something to Marion. She frowned, shook her head. Silas whispered again harder. Marion sighed and sat down. Silas stood up. "Mr. Vance," Silas said. He wasn't a lawyer, but he owned the room. "You say you were concerned for the boy's safety." "Absolutely," Derek said. "Smooth as oil, and that is why you tracked my son and Ms. Foster to the bus station. I wanted to convince her to turn herself in." "Interesting," Silas said, walking out from behind the table. "You stated in your deposition that you saw Miss Foster bring the boy to your shared home on October 22nd. Is that correct?" "Yes." Derek said it was a Tuesday. "I remember because I came home early from work." Silas stopped. "October 22nd. You came home early around what time?" 3 o'clock, Derek said confidently. "I saw them walk in." Silas turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I have the police report from Ms. Foster's eviction notice on October 22nd. She was at a clinic until 4:30. And Mr. Vance's own work logs, which my team pulled this morning, show him swiping out of his office at 6 o'clock. He couldn't have seen them at 3. In fact, he couldn't have seen them at all that afternoon." Derek blinked. The smooth veneer cracked. "I might have the dates mixed up. It was a stressful time." "It seems you have a lot of things mixed up," Silas said, his voice dropping to a growl. "Like why you were seen near my estate in Lake Forest 18 months ago on the day my son vanished." The room gasped. Derek's face went from confident to pale gray in a second. "Objection." A lawyer from the back yelled. Derek had a lawyer. "I have no further questions," Silas said, sitting down. "Court is in recess for 30 minutes. The judge banged the gavel. "I need to review this evidence." We spilled out into the hallway. It was chaos, but in the corner near the water fountain, Eli Julian was shaking. He looked at me, then at the guards blocking his path to me. "Piper!" he cried out. Silas looked at his son. Then he looked at me. He walked over to the guard. "Let him go, Sir Protocol." "I said let him go," Silas ordered. The guard stepped back. Julian ran to me. I caught him burying my face in his hair. He smelled of the expensive shampoo from the safe house, but underneath he was still my Eli. Silas walked over to us. He looked at me and the ice was gone from his eyes. There was only a profound, weary respect. "You aren't a kidnapper," Silas said quietly, "and you aren't a gold digger. You're the only reason he's alive." "I love him," I said. "I know," Silas said. "I won't let them take him from you. I won't rob my son of the person who saved him." Before I could answer, a side door opened. A man in a plain suit beckoned to us. "Mr. Vale, Miss Foster, in here, please." It was Agent Miller from the FBI. We walked into a small conference room. Miller closed the blinds. He threw a file on the table. "We have a problem," Miller said. Mr. Vance's little slip-up on the stand confirmed what we suspected. "We have a witness, a landscaping contractor who saw a man matching Derek Vance's description arguing with a driver in a van 2M from the Vale estate on the day of the abduction." I put a hand over my mouth. "Derek? But why? He's a portfolio manager. He doesn't know criminals. He has gambling debts." Miller said, "Massive ones. He owes the kind of people who break legs or take children as collateral, but he couldn't have done it alone." Silas said he doesn't have the access. The security codes to the estate were bypassed. Someone on the inside had to let them in. Miller nodded. "That's the other part." He reached into the folder and pulled out a photograph. It was grainy, taken with a long-range lens, likely from a surveillance stakeout related to the gambling ring. It showed two men standing in a parking lot, shaking hands. One was a man in a dark suit, his face partially obscured, but recognizable as a high-ranking executive. The other man was older, silver hair, standing straight, impeccable posture. My father. I stared at the photo, the room tilted. My father shaking hands with who? Who is the man in the suit? I whispered, my voice barely working. That Silas said, his face turning to stone. Is Rowan Pike, my chief operating officer, my oldest friend? And the other man, Miller asked gently. Couldn't breathe. I felt like the floor had opened up and swallowed me whole. That's my father. Your father received a consulting fee of $200,000 into a shell account 3 days after Julian was taken, Miller said. And another payment last week. The day he disowned you, the world shattered. It wasn't just Derek. It wasn't just a bad marriage. My father, the man who preached honor, who cast me out for shaming the family. He hadn't disowned me because of Eli. He had disowned me because I had brought the evidence of his crime to his doorstep. My father, I choked out. Did he know? He didn't just know, Silas said, his voice terrifyingly cold. He was paid to ensure that if Julian ever surfaced, he would be sent away or discredited. He looked at me. You weren't just disowned, Piper. You were being silenced. Your father sold you out to protect his retirement fund. I sank into a chair. The betrayal was so absolute, so complete. It didn't feel like pain. It felt like death. What do we do? I asked, looking up at Silas. Silas buttoned his jacket. The grieving father was gone. The billionaire shark was back. We go back into that courtroom, Silas said. And we burn them to the ground. The conference room in the safe house had transformed into a war room. The mahogany table was buried under stacks of financial records, cell phone tower, ping logs, and grainy surveillance photos. The air smelled of stale coffee and high-stakes desperation. Silas Vale was no longer the weeping father I had seen in the tower. He was a general at war. He had brought in Marcus Cole, a private investigator who looked less like a detective and more like a retired linebacker, broad shoulders. A nose that had been broken twice and eyes that missed nothing. You need to stay here, Miss Foster, Cole said. His voice a low rumble as he organized a stack of bank statements. This part gets ugly. If Vance is connected to organized crime and your father is compromised, you are a walking target. I am already a target, I said, leaning over the table to point at a highlighted row on the spreadsheet. They destroyed my credit. They dragged my name through the mud. I am not sitting in a tower waiting for men to fix my life. I know Derek. I know how he thinks. Silas looked at me. He saw the set of my jaw. He nodded to Cole. Let her help. She knows the players. We spent the next 3 hours dissecting the corpse of my marriage. It was a forensic audit of betrayal. Cole had managed to access Derek's hidden accounts, the ones he thought he had buried deep enough to hide from the divorce attorneys. Look at the structuring, Cole said, tapping the screen. Deposits of $9,000, just under the reporting limit. They start 18 months ago, right when Julian was taken, I whispered. And they stopped 3 weeks ago, Cole added. Right when you found him, I stared at the numbers. It made sense. The pressure Derek had put on me to sign the divorce papers quickly. The way he had tried to force me to waive all financial discovery. He wasn't just being greedy. He was terrified. He needed me out of the picture, impoverished and discredited, so that if the money trail ever led back to him, he could claim I was the unstable one, that I was the liability. He had been setting me up to be the fall guy for a crime I didn't even know existed. Who is paying him? Silas asked. Trace the source. It's a shell company. Cole said Northgate Consulting LLC, registered in Delaware. No employees. No office. Just a routing number. Dig deeper. Silas commanded. Cole typed furiously. The registered agent is a lawyer in the Caymans. But the initial funding, here we go. The seed capital for the shell came from a holding company called V Meridian Partners. Silas went pale. That is an internal investment vehicle. It's used for executive bonuses. Who controls it? I asked. Silas didn't answer. He walked to the window looking out at the dark lake. Rowan Pike. The name hung in the air like smoke. The best friend. The man in the photo shaking hands with my father. We checked your father's accounts too, Piper. Cole said gently. He slid a piece of paper across the table. I didn't want to look, but I had to. There it was. A transfer of $50,000. Then another, then a final lump sum of $100,000. Why, I choked out. My dad has money. He lives in a paid-off house in Beeksley. Why would he need this? He doesn't have money. Cole corrected. He has debt. We found a lien on the house and a judgment from a failed real estate venture in Florida 2 years ago. He owes nearly $2 million to private lenders, the kind who don't sue you when you don't pay. They hurt you. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening sound. My father wasn't a monster. He was a coward. He had gotten into trouble and Rowan Pike had bought him. My father had sold his integrity and eventually his own daughter to keep his knees from being broken. I grabbed my phone. Piper, don't. Cole warned. I need to hear him say it. I dialed my father's number. He answered on the first ring as if he had been staring at the phone, waiting for the axe to fall. I told you not to call. His voice was tight, high-pitched. I know about the money, Dad. I said, I know about Northgate Consulting. I know about your debt. Silence. Then the sound of ragged breathing. You don't understand, he stammered. I had no choice. They were going to take the house. They were going to you helped them hide a child, I screamed. You helped them frame me. I didn't know about the boy at first, he cried. I thought it was corporate espionage. I thought I was just passing information about Derek. But then they told me I was in too deep. Piper, you have to stop. You have to drop this. You can't drop it. Julian is a person. Dad, not a leverage point. Listen to me. He was yelling now. A sound of pure terror. Rowan isn't the only one. There are others. If you keep digging, they won't just ruin your name. They will kill you. Stop digging. For God's sake, Piper, run. The line went dead. I looked at Silas. He's scared. He should be, Silas said grimly. We have a location, Cole interrupted. I just cross-referenced Derek's credit card history with the dates of the Northgate deposits. He rented a commercial storage unit in Cicero the day after the kidnapping. He's been paying the monthly fee in cash, but last month he got lazy and used his card for the late fee. Unit 4B at Loctite Storage on Laram Avenue. Cole read. Let's go, Silas said, moving toward the door. No, Cole stopped him. Mr. Vale, you are too recognizable. If Rowan has eyes on you, he'll know we're moving. You stay with the boy. I'll go. I'm going too, I said. Miss Foster. I can identify Derek's handwriting. I lied. I know what belongings he might have hidden there, and frankly, I am done being told to wait in the car. Cole looked at Silas. Silas nodded. Keep her safe. The drive to Cicero took 40 minutes. The storage facility was a rusted metal graveyard under the flight path of Midway Airport. Planes roared overhead, shaking the ground every 90 seconds. It was raining again. A cold, miserable drizzle that slicked the asphalt. Cole parked his nondescript sedan around the back away from the security cameras. He picked the lock on the side gate in 10 seconds flat. We moved through the rows of orange metal doors, the numbers counting down. Unit 4B. Cole used a bolt cutter on the padlock. It snapped with a loud crack that was swallowed by the roar of a passing jet. He rolled the door up. The smell hit us first. Must and old oil. I clicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through the dust. The unit wasn't full of furniture. It was set up like a cell. There was a cot in the corner, a bucket, a pile of comic books, and on a metal shelf sitting alone was a toy train engine. I walked over to it. It was heavy, made of die-cast metal. I turned it over. Scratched into the black paint on the bottom were the initials Jov. He was here, I whispered, my heart breaking. Before he ran away, they kept him here. Piper, look at this, Cole called out. He was holding a clear plastic bag containing a cell phone. It was an old flip phone, a burner. The battery is dead, Cole said, plugging it into a portable power bank he had brought. Give it a second. The screen flickered to life. Cole scrolled through the menu. No calls, just one voice memo. Recorded 18 months ago. He pressed play. The audio was crackly. Recorded in a car or a windy place, but the voice was unmistakable. It was Derek. I have the package, but the price just went up. You didn't tell me the kid was sick. Then a second voice, smoother, deeper. Rowan Pike. The boy is not the priority. You idiot. The boy is leverage. As long as he is missing, the trust is frozen. As long as the trust is frozen, Silas cannot block the merger. Keep him alive. Keep him hidden. If he surfaces, you lose your payout. If he dies, you lose your life. Do you understand? I understand, Derek's voice replied, sounding small. The recording ended. It wasn't a ransom, I said, staring at the phone. It was a corporate coup. Rowan wanted to merge the company, and Silas's family trust blocked it. He needed Julian gone to freeze the assets. We have them, Cole said, unplugging the phone. This is conspiracy, kidnapping, extortion. This buries them all. We need to go, I said. A sudden wave of nausea hit me. I don't like this place. We stepped back out into the rain. Cole pulled the door down. We began to walk back toward the car. Wait! Cole stopped, his hand going to the holster under his jacket. The alleyway we had come down was empty, but the silence felt heavy. What is it? I whispered. We're being watched, Cole said. Move fast. We broke into a jog. I pulled my own phone out. I'm uploading the audio file, I said, my fingers flying across the screen, sending it to Silas and to the cloud. Good girl, Cole grunted. We reached the corner. Cole's sedan was there, but so was a black SUV blocking the exit. The headlights of the SUV flared on, blinding us. Get behind me, Cole shouted, drawing his weapon. The doors of the SUV opened. Two men in tactical gear stepped out, holding assault rifles. They didn't aim to kill, they aimed to contain. Then the rear passenger door opened. A man stepped out. He was wearing a trench coat over a bespoke suit. He held a black umbrella over his head, shielding himself from the dirty rain. He looked like he was attending a funeral. It was Rowan Pike. He didn't look scary in the way Derek did. He didn't look desperate. He looked bored. He looked like a man who was annoyed that a meeting had run late. Mr. Cole, Rowan said, his voice carrying easily over the distance. Please put the gun down. You are outgunned, and my men are not on a payroll that requires them to follow the Geneva Convention. Cole didn't lower his weapon. I have the evidence, Rowan. It's already in the cloud. You can't stop it. Rowan smiled. It was a cold, thin expression. The cloud is a wonderful thing, but data can be corrupted and people can disappear. He turned his gaze to me. Miss Foster, he said, I must say you have been a persistent annoyance. Your father said you were stubborn. I should have listened. You used my father. I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. You used my husband. You stole a child. Rowan took a step forward. I secured a future. Silas is too sentimental. He was going to let the company stagnate. I did what was necessary. He looked at me with a strange kind of pity. You think you are the hero of this story, don't you? Rowan said softly, the noble savior. But you are just a piece of the machinery. Piper. Derek needed a scapegoat. I needed a distraction. You fit the profile perfectly. Desperate, emotional, expendable. He checked his watch. You really should have taken the check, my dear. Now you are just a loose end, and I hate loose ends. Get in the car, Piper, Cole yelled, firing a warning shot at the ground near Rowan's feet. The men raised their rifles. No! I screamed, grabbing Cole's arm. They'll kill us. They're going to kill us anyway. Cole snarled. Run. But before we could move, a sound tore through the air. Not a gunshot. Sirens, lots of them. Rowan's face changed. For the first time, the boredom vanished. He looked toward the main road. Blue and red lights were flashing against the low clouds. Getting closer fast. You called them. Rowan snapped at me. I held up my phone. The screen showed the upload complete bar, and below it a sent message to Agent Miller, location shared. I didn't just upload the file, I said, my voice trembling but loud. I sent our live location to the FBI task force 10 minutes ago. Rowan looked at me, then at his men. The sirens were screaming now, right outside the gate. This isn't over, Rowan hissed. He turned back to the SUV. Go now. The men jumped back in. The SUV squealed in reverse, smashing through a chain-link fence and disappearing into the industrial maze behind the storage yard. Cole lowered his gun, exhaling a breath he must have been holding for 5 minutes. You cut that close, kid, he said. I leaned against the cold metal of the storage unit, my legs giving out. I clutched the burner phone in my pocket. I had the truth. I had the weapon to kill a king. But as I looked at the tail lights of Rowan's car fading into the darkness, I knew the hardest part wasn't surviving the chase. It was going to be the reckoning. The meeting took place at a diner called the Iron Skillet, situated on a desolate stretch of highway 10 miles outside the city limits. It was the kind of place where truck drivers stopped for caffeine and silence. I chose it because it was public enough to be safe, but anonymous enough that no one would recognize the disgraced daughter of a local socialite. I arrived 10 minutes early. I ordered a black coffee and watched the door. When my father walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. In my memory, my father was a statue tall, imposing, carved from granite and moral superiority. The man who walked through the glass door was a ghost. His shoulders were slumped. His skin was the color of old parchment, and his suit, usually tailored to perfection, hung loosely on his frame. He looked like he had aged 20 years in the span of 3 weeks. He saw me in the back booth and hesitated. For a second, I thought he might turn around and leave, but he didn't. He walked over and sat down. He didn't take off his coat. He didn't look me in the eye. Piper, he said. His voice was brittle. $200,000, I said flatly. I didn't want pleasantries. That was the price, wasn't it? That was what I was worth. He winced as if I had slapped him. He reached for the sugar dispenser, his hands trembling so badly the metal flap clicked against the glass. It wasn't like that, he whispered. Don't lie to me, I hissed, leaning forward. We have the bank records, Dad. We have the connection to Northgate Consulting. You took money from the people who kidnapped a child. You took money from the people who framed your own daughter. I didn't know about the boy, he snapped, his head snapping up. His eyes were redimmed and terrified. Not at first. You have to believe me. Piper, I didn't know they had taken Julian Vale. I just knew Derek was in trouble. He came to me. He said he owed money to dangerous men. He said he needed help moving some cash around. And you helped him. I was drowning, he said, his voice cracking. The Florida deal, it wiped me out. I was leveraging the house to pay the interest. When Rowan Pike approached me, he didn't say he was a criminal. He said he was helping Derek clean up a mess. He offered me a consulting fee. Felt like a lifeline. And when did you know? I asked. When did you realize you were taking blood money? He looked down at the Formica table, tracing a scratch in the laminate. When you brought the boy home, when Derek called me that night, panic in his voice, telling me you had the package. That was when I knew. And you disowned me, I said, the bitterness coating my tongue like poison. You stood at that door in the rain, looked at that scared little boy, and you slammed the door in our faces. You threw me to the wolves, Dad. He looked up then, and I saw something in his eyes that chilled me more than his cruelty. It was fear, pure, unadulterated terror. I didn't throw you to the wolves, Piper, he said, his voice trembling. I was trying to get you out of the den. I frowned. What? Rowan Pike called me 10 minutes before you arrived that night. My father said. Tears were leaking from the corners of his eyes now. He knew you were coming. He knew everything. He told me that if I let you in, if I let you stay in Columbus, there would be an accident, a car crash, a gas leak. He said you were a liability as long as you were close to the truth. He reached across the table, trying to take my hand. Pulled it away. I had to make you leave, he sobbed. I had to be cruel. I had to make you hate me enough to run away if I had taken you in. They would have killed you that night. I took the money to keep them happy, and I kicked you out to keep you alive. It was the only way. I stared at him. I wanted to feel relief. I wanted to feel that warm rush of forgiveness, knowing that my father still loved me, that he was just a victim of circumstance. But I felt nothing. That is not love, Dad, I said, my voice steady. That is cowardice. I saved your life. No, I shook my head. You saved your own skin. You were afraid of Rowan Pike, so you made me homeless. You were afraid of losing your house, so you let a child sleep on the street. You could have gone to the police. You could have called Silas Vale. You could have stood up and fought for me. I stood up. I looked down at the man who had raised me, and I realized he was a stranger. He was a small man in a big coat, terrified of his own shadow. You chose money and fear, I said. I chose the boy. Piper, please, he begged. If you go back to Chicago, they will kill you. Don't go back. I am already back, I said. And I am going to finish what you didn't have the guts to start. I walked out of the diner. I didn't look back. I got into the waiting car where Marcus Cole was watching the perimeter. You okay? Cole asked. No, I said. But I'm done. We drove back to the city. The game had shifted. We knew the players. We knew the stakes. And now we knew the timeline. Silas and his team had been busy while I was handling my family ghosts. They had uncovered the endgame. Rowan Pike wasn't just trying to hurt Silas. He was trying to sell the company. There was a merger on the table with a European conglomerate, a deal worth billions. But the Vale family trust had a clause, a dead-hand provision written by Silas's grandfather. It stated that no sale of the controlling interest could occur without the signature of the heir or proof of the heir's death or permanent incapacitation. Once the heir turned 18, but while Julian was a minor and missing, the trust was in a legal limbo, a suspended state that Rowan had found a loophole for. If Julian remained missing for 2 years, the board could vote to bypass the trust for the stability of the company. The 2-year mark was 3 weeks away. That was why they hadn't killed Julian. They needed him missing but alive just in case the vote failed, and they needed to force a signature later. He was an insurance policy stored in a storage unit. We need to trap him. Silas said we were back in the war room. Rowan is cautious. He won't speak on an open line again. He thinks I have the only copy of the recording. I said he saw me upload it, but he might think he can intercept it or that I'm bluffing about the FBI. He's arrogant. He's desperate. Cole corrected. The merger vote is scheduled for Friday. He needs this to go away. Let's give him a way out. I set a trap. The plan was simple and dangerous. I would reach out to Derek. We knew he was hiding, likely in panic mode after the storage unit raid. I would offer him a deal, the recording in exchange for my safety. But the meeting place would be wired for sound and video. And the real target wasn't Derek. It was getting Derek to call Rowan for authorization. But we didn't have to wait for Derek to take the bait. Derek came to us. Or rather, he tried to come to me. I was staying in a temporary apartment provided by the FBI, a decoy location to draw fire away from the safe house where Julian was. It was late past midnight. I was sitting in the dark watching the street. The lock on the back door clicked. It wasn't a sophisticated entry. It was clumsy. The sound of a credit card shimming a latch. I signaled Cole, who was in the bedroom. He nodded and moved into position. The door opened. A figure slipped in. He was wearing a hoodie, trying to look like a thief, but he moved like a man who had never broken a law until he got desperate. He went straight for the laptop I had left conspicuously on the kitchen table. As his hand touched the device, the lights flicked on. "Hello, Derek," I said from the armchair. He spun around. He looked terrible, unshaven, sweaty, his eyes wild. He wasn't the slick manipulator anymore. He was a rat in a corner. "Piper," he breathed. "Give me the phone, the one from the unit. Give it to me and I can fix this." "Fix it how?" I asked. "By killing me. No, I just need to destroy it. Rowan said if I get the phone, he'll pay off my debt. He'll let me walk." "Please, Piper, they're gonna kill me." "You're pathetic," I said. Cole stepped out of the bedroom, his gun drawn. "Hands on your head, Vance." Derek looked at the gun, then at the window. For a second, I thought he might run, but he just crumbled. He fell to his knees, sobbing. "It wasn't my idea," he wailed as Cole cuffed him. "I just wanted the money. They told me nobody would get hurt." "A child was locked in a metal box for 18 months, I said, standing over him. "You don't get to say nobody got hurt." As the police dragged Derek away, he was still screaming that it was all Piper's fault, that I had seduced him into it, that I was the mastermind. It was the last lie of a drowning man. We had the pawn. Now we needed the king. I returned to the safe house at dawn. Julian was awake. He was sitting at the kitchen island eating a bowl of cereal. Silas was sitting next to him, reading a newspaper, looking domestic and terrified all at once. Julian looked up as I walked in. He smiled, milk on his upper lip. "Did you catch the bad guys?" he asked. "We caught one of them," I said, sitting down next to him. I was exhausted, my bones aching on the counter. There was a bowl of mints, those red and white starlight peppermints. Silas must have had them in the pantry. Julian reached out and took one. He unwrapped it, the crinkle of the plastic loud in the quiet room. He popped it in his mouth. Then he stopped. His chewing slowed. He stared at the counter, his eyes going wide and vacant. The same look he had when the nightmare took him. "Julian," Silas asked, putting down the paper. "What is it?" Julian took the mint out of his mouth and put it on the napkin. He pushed it away. "The smell," he whispered. "What smell, buddy?" I asked gently. "The mint man," Julian said. "The one who came to the school before Derek." I looked at Silas. "Who came to the school?" "Julian. You said you didn't remember the face." "I don't," Julian said, his voice trembling. He was wearing a mask, a clown mask. But he smelled like that candy. Strong, like he was eating a whole bag of them. He looked up at Silas. "He picked me up," Julian said. "He told me my dad was hurt. He told me to get in the car. He smelled like mints and that stuff the cleaning lady uses." "Ammonia?" Silas asked. "No, dry cleaning," Julian said. "Chemicals and mints." Silas went rigid. He looked at me, his face draining of color. "Rowan," Silas breathed. "He has a nervous tic. He eats peppermints, rolls of them, and he is obsessive about his suits. He has them dry cleanin' daily. He took him, I said, realizing the horror of it. It wasn't a hired thug. It wasn't Derek. The COO of the company walked up to your son at his private school wearing a mask and took him. Because Julian knew him, Silas said, closing his eyes. He wouldn't have gotten in the car with a stranger. But he recognized the voice or the posture. Rowan had to do it himself to ensure the handoff to Derek went smoothly. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just corporate. It was personal. Rowan Pike had held this boy in his arms as a baby. The phone rang. It was Marion Clean. Silas put it on speaker. "We have a problem," Marion said. Her voice was tight, professional, and devoid of empathy. "The market is reacting to the rumors of Julian's return. The stock is wobbling, and Rowan has just called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He is going to push for a vote of no confidence in you. Silas, he claims you are mentally unstable due to grief and that this boy is a hoax you concocted to stop the merger. He's gaslighting the whole board." Silas said, "He has the votes, Silas." Marion said, "Unless you produce Julian publicly and unless you prove Rowan is the villain, but if you do that, if you reveal that the COO kidnapped the heir, the scandal will destroy the company's value. The stock will tank. You will be the king of a pile of ash." There was a silence on the line. "So, what are you suggesting, Marion?" Silas asked. "I'm suggesting a settlement," Marion said. "We cut a deal with Rowan. He resigns quietly with a golden parachute. We claim Julian was found safe after running away. We buried the kidnapping. We saved the stock. You want to let him walk?" I asked, outraged. "He stole a child. I am protecting the asset." Marion snapped. "Silas, you have a duty to the shareholders. You have a duty to the legacy. If you go to war with Rowan in public, Vale Meridian collapses. You choose. Do you want justice or do you want your empire?" Silas looked at the phone. Then he looked at Julian, who was pushing the peppermint candy further away, his small face pinched with the memory of the Mint Man. Silas reached out and covered Julian's hand with his own. "Marion," Silas said, his voice low and dangerous, "prepare the press conference for the settlement?" Marion asked. "No," Silas said. "For the truth, I don't care about the stock price. I don't care about the empire. Tomorrow, the world is going to know exactly who Rowan Pike is." He hung up the phone. He looked at me. "We aren't going to trap him with a wire, Piper. We are going to destroy him in front of the world." The air in the Cook County courtroom was not stale. It was electric. It vibrated with the kind of tension that usually precedes a natural disaster or a revolution. The gallery was packed. Reporters who had spent the last week shredding my reputation were now leaning forward, pens poised, hungry for the finale. I sat next to Silas Vale. On his other side sat Julian, no longer Eli, but a boy who had reclaimed his name while keeping the strength he had learned in the dark. He was drawing on a legal pad, but his hand was shaking. Rowan Pike was there. He sat in the front row of the gallery, impeccably dressed in a navy suit, looking less like a man facing destruction and more like a CEO attending a boring board meeting. He was betting on the power of the institution. He was betting that money would protect money. The Honorable Justice Vance adjusted her glasses. "We are here to finalize the custody arrangement for the minor. Julian Vale. The court has reviewed the initial filings." "Your Honor," a lawyer stood up. It wasn't Marion Clean. It was a man representing the Vale Family Trust, a legal proxy for Rowan's interests. "We have a motion to delay. We have received new documents suggesting that MT Silas Vale is currently under extreme duress and may be unfit to make decisions regarding the minor's long-term estate management. We request a 30-day continuance to evaluate the mental stability of the father." It was the final play. Delay. Obfuscate. Keep Julian in limbo until the merger vote passed tomorrow morning. Silas stiffened beside me. I saw his hand clench into a fist on the table. They are going to bury us in paper. Silas whispered. They are going to drag this out until I break. No, I said. I stood up. My legs didn't shake this time. They aren't, Miss Foster, the judge warned. You are not counsel. I am a witness to a crime, Your Honor, I said, my voice carrying to the back of the room. And I have evidence that cannot wait 30 days. I have evidence that explains why Julian Vale was taken and why he was kept alive. I signaled to Marcus Cole, who was standing near the bafe. He handed a flash drive to the court clerk. Your Honor, I continued, ignoring the objections shouting from the opposing table. What you are about to hear is a recording taken 3 days ago. It is a conversation between myself, a private investigator, and Mr. Rowan Pike. The judge looked at Rowan. Rowan didn't move, but the color was draining from his face. He hadn't expected the cloud upload. He thought his intimidation squad had worked. Play it, the judge ordered. The audio filled the room, the sound of rain, the sound of fear, and then the smooth, cultured voice of Rowan Pike. The boy is not the priority. The boy is leverage. As long as he is missing, the trust is frozen. The courtroom gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. But I wasn't done. It wasn't just about a merger, Your Honor, I said, turning to look directly at Rowan. We found documents in the storage unit, a timeline. Rowan didn't just want to freeze the trust for 2 years. He intended to keep Julian hidden until his 18th birthday. I held up a piece of paper, a draft contract found in the box with the train. This is a transfer of voting rights, I said, prepared for a legal adult to sign. The plan was not to kill Julian. It was to break him, to condition him, to keep him in a box until he was so traumatized and dependent that he would sign over the empire to the man who saved him, the man who smelled like mints. I looked at Julian. He had stopped drawing. He was looking at Rowan with a terrifying recognition. He wanted to turn a child into a puppet. I said, my voice breaking. That isn't corporate strategy. That is torture. Rowan stood up. This is preposterous. That recording is a deep fake. This woman is a fraud. Sit down, Mr. Pike. The judge roared, slamming her gavel. We also have the money trail, Silas said, standing up next to me. He looked at his former friend with eyes that were dead cold. Transfers from V Meridian Partners to a shell company in Delaware, and from there to the personal accounts of Derek Vance and others. Derek Vance, the prosecutor called out. Take the stand. Derek was brought in from the holding cell. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a frantic, sweating terror. He looked at Rowan, then at me, then at the judge. Mr. Vance? The prosecutor asked, did you receive payments to hold Julian Vale in a storage unit in Cicero? I was told it was temporary, Derek stammered. I was told it was for his own good, Rowan said. Silas was unstable. He said we were protecting the boy. You kept a child in a box for money, the prosecutor said flatly. And when Miss Foster found him, you tried to frame her. Is that correct? I had to. Derek shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Rowan. He told me if I didn't get the boy back, he would kill me. He sent men to my house. I didn't want to hurt Piper. I just wanted to survive. So, you admit it, the judge said. Yes, Derek wailed. I admit it. Just don't let him near me. The room was in chaos. Rowan Pike was signaling his lawyers, trying to push toward the exit, but the baifs had moved to block the aisle. Then the doors at the back of the room opened. A hush fell over the gallery as an older man walked in. He walked slowly, leaning on a cane I had never seen him use before. He looked small. He looked defeated. It was my father. He walked to the front of the room. He didn't look at the gallery. He didn't look at Silas. He looked only at me. "State your name," the judge said, confused by the interruption. "Robert Foster," my father said. His voice was quiet, stripped of all its pompous authority. "I am Piper's father." He took a breath that rattled in his chest. "I am here to confirm the bank records," he said. "I accepted $200,000 from an associate of Mr. Pike. I accepted it to keep my mouth shut about the money laundering I suspected Dererick was involved in, and later I accepted it to ensure my daughter was alienated from the situation." He turned to me. Tears were streaming down his face, tracking through the deep lines of his cheeks. "I told her to leave," he said to the room. "I closed my door to her and that little boy. I told myself I was protecting her from these men. But I wasn't. I was protecting myself. I sold my daughter's safety for a check." He looked at me, his eyes begging for something absolution. "Perhaps I am guilty," he whispered. "I surrender myself to the court." The silence that followed was heavy. My father, the man who cared more about his lawn than his feelings, had just destroyed his life to validate mine. He took a step toward me, his hand half raised. "Piper." I looked at him. I saw the regret. I saw the ruin. But I also saw the rain that night. I felt the cold of the door slamming in my face. I didn't step forward. I didn't hug him. I simply nodded. It was a recognition of his truth, but it was also a boundary. The debt was paid. But the relationship was bankrupt. I turned away. The judge cleared her throat. She looked at Rowan Pike, who was now surrounded by 3 federal agents who had quietly entered the room during the testimony. "This court has heard enough," the judge said. "In the matter of the custody of Julian Vale," she ruled, her voice ringing out like a bell, "I find that Mr. Silas Vale is the fit and proper guardian. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to the father, effective immediately." She paused, looking at me. "However," she continued, "the court recognizes the extraordinary role played by Ms. Piper Foster. This child is here today because of her resilience and moral courage. It is the opinion of this court and the recommendation of the guardian ad litem that severing the bond between Julian and Ms. Foster would be detrimental to the child's recovery." She banged the gavel. "Ms. Foster is granted permanent visitation rights to be scheduled at the discretion of the child and is to be included in the therapeutic recovery plan." Order granted. "And regarding Mr. Pike," the judge added, her eyes narrowing, "Officers, you may proceed." Rowan Pike adjusted his cuffs as the agents approached him. He tried to maintain his dignity, but as the metal handcuffs clicked around his wrists, that sharp final sound, the facade crumbled. He wasn't a titan of industry anymore. He was just a man in a suit who had lost to a woman he considered a loose end. "Silas!" Rowan shouted as they dragged him out. "You're destroying the company. The stock will plummet. You're burning the legacy." Silas stood up. He didn't shout. He just watched his former friend being hauled away. "Let it burn," Silas said softly. "I have my son." We walked out of the courthouse and into the blinding light of the afternoon. The rain had finally stopped. The sky was a piercing, brilliant blue. The reporters were shouting, a wall of noise and cameras. But the security team Silas had hired, real security this time, kept them back. We stood on the wide stone steps. I took a deep breath of the cold air. Tasted like freedom. I felt a small hand slip into mine. I looked down. Julian was looking up at me. He wasn't hiding behind me anymore. He was standing beside me. "We won," he said. "We won," I agreed. Silas stepped up next to us. He looked at the crowd. Then he looked at me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. "The guest house on the estate." Silas said, "It's yours for as long as you want it. No rent, no strings." Just be near him. I don't need charity. Silas, I said. It's not charity, Silas said, his voice thick with emotion. It's gratitude. You gave me back my life. He looked at his son. Julian, are you ready to go home? Julian looked at his father. Then he turned and wrapped his arms around my waist, burying his face in my coat. He squeezed me so hard it knocked the wind out of me. I don't have to choose, do I? Julian asked, his voice muffled by the wool. The judge said, I don't have to choose. No, sweetie, I said, stroking his hair. You never have to choose again. Julian looked up, his eyes bright and clear. I don't need to choose who I lose. I choose to be loved. Silas put his hand on Julian's shoulder, and then tentatively, he placed his other hand on my shoulder. We stood there, a broken, messy, reconstructed family unit, standing against the world. You aren't a stranger, Piper, Silas said, his voice rough. You are the one who brought him back. I looked out at the city, at the skyline that had once terrified me. It didn't look like a prison anymore. It looked like a future. Let's go home, I said, and for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where that was. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from right now. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed Piper and Julian's journey, please make sure to subscribe to the HOA Karen Vlog channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.